Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I never do that, but you know. I'm Mike Frost. I'm the Somerset County Department of Human Services Director. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our No Man is an Island Joint Council and Board meeting. This is the gathering that is really both a reward for the work that you do and a celebration of the work that you do. And that's specifically for LACADA and CAS and HSAC, PACADA, and the Mental Health Board. So thanks to all of you for all of that. My pleasure today is to welcome you and to introduce Paul Drake, who is our Human Services Commissioner Liaison. And I will tell you that in my 40 years here, Paul, you're going to be embarrassed. I have never worked with a Human Services Liaison who has dug in the way Paul has, to really understand the work we do and to champion the work we do. And not just as a one-off or part of a political process. This is part of who this guy is. So, that said, Mr. Drake.
Some big shoes to fill. Good morning, everyone. That's terrific. Yeah, thank you, Mike. I appreciate those kind words. And again, my name is Paul Drake, and I am a Somerset County Commissioner. I grew up in Somerville, right down the street. I live in Hillsborough. I've been a Somerset County resident my whole life. And it's really my pleasure to be here to speak to all of you. I think the work that you do is so important, not only for all the clients, all the folks that you help, but just for yourselves and for your own personal enrichment. Being able to get together and talk about the issues that most affect people's lives. So I want to thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's always an honor to be with all of you. I know your careers are so important in the lives you save and the people you help. But each of you represent here today has a focus, a particular problem you've identified, and you're experts in helping to ameliorate or even resolve those concerns. But it's, what we all have in common certainly is the humanity that you all express, and also the human touch, and most importantly, your empathy. Your ability to put yourselves in the place of somebody else and understand what their dynamics are going through. And able to, it helps you not only help yourselves, but help people. So it's so vitally important, certainly as we come out of the COVID epidemic into a more stable, but even still a scary time. And while we were isolating ourselves at home from the virus, we're also isolating ourselves from each other. The resulting loneliness that we experienced, which we're here today to discuss and address, has affected all of us. And it's been deliberating and debilitating for some. The loss of connections to other people, the fear of contracting the deadly disease, possible spreading to loved ones, and the anxiety as we all wondered if we could get through this and still be the same people, the same community, and the same country. So it's not as if so many people weren't affecting from someone's crippling anxiety before COVID. It's just that COVID made it worse. And I can tell you from my own experience, I still deal with the very anxiety issues of how it affected me. I take medication every morning. I deal with my own issues with my professionals. But I want to be able to say that it's so important to be able to express that to all of you, because all the folks you deal with and all the people that you help, it's so very important that you can sort of begin to understand. I could certainly go on and talk about all those issues, but I just wanted to say that it is a pleasure to be here. As I look at my prepared comments, I can certainly say that I often get opportunities to speak at a number of events. Last week I spoke about climate change and about agriculture in Somerset County, and that's certainly a passion of mine. But this is just as important, if not more important, because you affect everyone's lives at the most critical level, at the most intimate level, and the most important level, where we can, certainly affect how we can interact. And so that loneliness that people experience, just not only from being isolated, but also just being able to reach out and touch someone and say, I understand, or I work with you. So I'm looking forward, I'm glad that you're all here. I'm glad that, you're gonna hear some great speakers throughout the day. And I'm so proud that I've had the opportunity to not only speak to you about this, but when you come in, I'm also so proud to work with you and honor that Somerset County can partner with all of you, not only through your organizations, but we can help support you through our own great staff here at Somerset County. So with that, I just want to thank you all for the work you do, and I'm sure you'll enjoy today's program, and I hope you'll really take away not only the issues, but realize that you're all very important, and we recognize that importance. And I just wanted to emphasize on behalf of the Somerset County Commissioners that we know that the work you do is vitally important, and we thank you very much for it. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing? So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Rheanah Johnson, and I am the Human Services Coordinator for the Somerset County Department of Human Services. So my role today is in regards to the Human Services Advisory Council. But just overall, this next portion, we're just going to give you a brief overview of each of the councils that are represented here today. So we're going to get started. Okay, so firstly, like I said, I facilitate the Human Services Advisory Council, and basically it is funded by the New Jersey Department of Children and Families, and it is a county-based planning, advisory, and coordinated organization dedicated to helping the community meet its human service needs. So in my opinion, our council basically covers the whole spectrum of all of the different councils that we have. So it's a great way to talk about mental health, to talk about older adults, to talk about youth, to talk about homelessness, basically to cover all of the issues that we are seeing. So the main purpose is for our partner agencies, our community members to come together, identify the issues that we're seeing in the community, and try to come up with ways that we can, mitigate those issues. I want to share that through our efforts from this last year, we did a letter in regards to the social work licensure delays. So I just want to thank all of the members of the HSAC. Basically through our efforts, we wrote a letter to our local legislators, just bringing awareness to the delays that were happening, mainly because of COVID, but it was up to, at one point, there were delays upwards of like 18 months. And we need those social workers, we need people working. So we wrote this letter, we did the outreach, and from it, we got a response, and we were able to have a workshop. It was open statewide to everyone. I think we had over like 100 people on the Zoom, and the social work board director basically answered questions, went over the process in detail, and I'm assuming, put some social workers at ease. So I'm very proud of the work that the council did through that. Looking forward, we are going to be identifying our goals for next year. There's always the issues of, transportation, unfortunately, homelessness. So we are going to try to see what we can do on a small scale, because those issues are large. And then we also are going to be really focusing on partnering with the Somerset County Helps Van. So for those of you who are not familiar, we have a mobile outreach initiative, and we have a van where we go into the community and we do different events, and we try to raise awareness on our services that we have here, but we also want to basically bring services to those most in need, right? Because like I said, transportation is an issue, and a big barrier that we have in the county is people not being aware of services. So we have to meet people where they are. I can share more information about the van, but we do have a mini webpage where we list the events that we're going to be at. We open it up to all of our partners to join us on these different events. is pretty much it about HSAC. We meet on the 4th Wednesday of every month, mainly. But our next meeting is gonna be on October 25th in this room. We're gonna do hybrid. Trying to get back to in person. I'm so happy all you guys are here today. And then our last meeting will be on November 15th, which is actually a Wednesday. So if you have any questions about the HSAC, or if you wanna just check it out, come to a meeting, or if you even wanna join, my contact information is here. You can catch me at the end if you have any questions, and thank you. So now I'm gonna hand it over to Lisa for LACADA.
So the local advisory council on alcohol and drug use may look a little bit different than what LACADA actually is named, and that is because the statutory name of LACADA has the word alcoholism and drug abuse in it, and it is my job to reduce stigma on substance use disorders, so that is why that name is going to look a little bit different than what's in the statute. So the local advisory council on alcohol and drug use is, or LACADA, as people know it, is a group of individuals from treatment agencies, nonprofit system, the community, including key stakeholders, and also persons in recovery. This group helps steer, plan, and vote on Chapter 51 funding or ERA funding. If anybody in this room does not know what Chapter 51 funding is, and I'm breaking everything, I don't know what just happened. Was that me? Okay, I'll just keep going. This group helps to steer and plan for and allocate Chapter 51 funds, which is an alcohol sales excise tax that is collected in the state. It's put into a non-lapsing fund, which is then dispersed to the 21 counties in New Jersey. Roughly, Somerset County's award each year is about $530,000, and that is determined to be allocated into different service categories for our residents that are underinsured or meet financial eligibility guidelines. Thank you, Rheanah. I don't know what I would do without her. So the current service categories include early intervention, the overdose fatality review program, intensive outpatient treatment and outpatient treatment, short-term residential treatment, detox, so withdrawal management, and we've added youth early intervention support services to those service categories as well. This group meets mostly every third Wednesday of the month. We do not meet every month, but again, the schedule is on the Human Services website. We have a hybrid model, so most of our meetings are virtual. We do have some in-person meetings quarterly. And our next meeting will be in October, on October 18th, and that meeting will be in person. It is an open public meeting, so anybody in this room is welcome to join, and we hope to see you there. Any questions on LACADA? Wonderful, I'll bring up Ebeny.
Hello. Can everyone see me over the podium? I'll just stand here, just in case. So how's everybody doing? Thanks for being here this morning. So for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, also familiar faces, my name is Ebeny Torres. I am the Addiction Services Coordinator here in Somerset County. I help Lisa with the LACADA and CAS responsibilities, with CAS in particular, which is the County Alliance Steering Subcommittee. It really serves as an advisory arm to LACADA, pushing all different efforts and coordinating within Somerset County to combat substance use disorders. We also push that through with our Municipal Alliance Network, which is comprised of all of our townships and boroughs, whether they be consortiums, whether they put their funds together to push these efforts of prevention, early intervention, and education. And so our Municipal Alliance Network is very integral to our CAS as well. CAS does help develop these plans and use the funds from the drug enforcement demand reduction, those funds that are given to us to be able to put on all of this programming that's so essential. So we develop and CAS recommends different programs, and we just collaborate to make sure that there's no duplication of efforts and that, you know, we're bringing forth new and changing programming because the issues are growing and changing, and so we need to go with the times, right? So we are always looking, CAS and LACADA are always looking for new members, people to get involved. I know we are all a part of different councils and have a lot on our plates, but even just coming to one meeting at a time, if you're able to, Lisa and I will be available afterward to talk with anyone who's interested, and also shameless plug for the Municipal Alliance Network. If anyone would like to join, if you live in Somerset County, or interested in getting involved in your local alliance, I'm happy to help that happen. So, does anyone have any questions? Thank you. Meg is next.
Thanks, Ebony. Ebony's always a tough one to follow, so good morning, everybody. My name is Meg Isbitski. I'm the mental health administrator. I am responsible for the mental health board. So the mental health board is a county council. There's one in every single county in New Jersey, and our responsibility really is to oversee the mental health response, needs, and continuum of care as it relates to Somerset County. So if you know anything about Somerset County, you know how diverse we are in terms of economics, lifestyle, different races, genders, everything. So we do care about everybody, but we always find ourselves advocating on behalf of our more vulnerable residents that don't have as many resources to connect to. So our role really is to help oversee agencies that get county and state funding to provide mental health services and monitor that provision, especially when we have new programs and grants coming in from the state. It's our responsibility to make sure that they're going to be a good fit for Somerset County. We also focus on community education and trying to spread awareness about mental health resources, because if you've ever tried to find a therapist for yourself or somebody else, you know just how confusing and messy it is. So one project that we're working on to help take away some of that messiness is contacting all of the mental health resources in Somerset County. So if that sounds like a massive project, that's because it is. I have currently 430 names on my list. So not to go on a tangent, but really just trying to take away some of that stress so that our residents don't have to deal with it. So we meet 9 times a year. Our next meeting is next Thursday, October 5th, and it's at 5 p.m., so everyone should be able to come because it won't interact with your workday. We are having them via Zoom, might go back to in-person very soon, but really we welcome anybody to come share your opinion. If you live or work in Somerset County, please come and let us know what's happening on the ground floor, where we can help, what our needs are. Our role really is to then make sure that we're educating that to the leadership and our county commissioners so that they can help put efforts and emphasis where it needs to be. So that is a mental health board. I don't know if there's any questions. I don't think we have time for questions. But we're really trying hard because, as you know right now, mental health is this big, sexy term, but that is because it's a real need right now. And if there's one thing that I think COVID did was it helped reduce some of the stigmas around mental health. So we're jumping on that opportunity. So please come and join us. And then lastly, Lisa and I co-facilitate our PACADA. So our PACADA is kind of our subcommittee of Mental Health Board and our subcommittee of LACADA, made up of all of our treatment and recovery and prevention providers. We found that when they used to be siloed groups, the same people who were coming to PAC were the same ones coming to PACADA, because more often than not, agencies are seeing mental health needs and substance use needs intermittently. And if we're going to really talk the talk, we have to start integrating, and this is just one example of that. So our PACADA works a little bit differently than the rest of our county councils, because it really is just an opportunity to come, network, a little more networking when we were in person than remote, but we really just exist to provide awareness and a space to connect and educate about new programming, new trends and issues happening, while we have our providers in the room that can make sure that we can inform them, but they can really educate us on what's happening. So our next meeting for PACADA is October 2nd, so that's Monday at 9:30 a.m. So it's Monday morning. First thing that you can do is join us for this meeting. So we're going to have just an example of our speaker, someone coming to speak about the Robert Wood Johnson Tobacco Cessation Program, because that really impacts those who are seeking mental health services and substance use services. And then we're inviting one of our newer agencies, Stress Care, to come and talk, because even if we're mental health and substance use providers, it's helpful to learn different levels of care, different services and specific needs, so that we can better connect our residents.
Yeah, no, it's in short, our less boring council. Our other councils, we have to talk about grants and funding and allocations, and this is our least bureaucratic council, and we are always watching trends and different topics that we want to bring to you guys, and this is the council where we try to do that and try to bring new resources to your attention, and it's your opportunity to one-on-one talk to those resources and ask your questions as well.
So thank you. That sums up all of the county councils that are under our Operation and Planning Division. If you are interested in learning more about any or all of them, please make sure you connect with us after on the break, and we'll be happy to give you more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's not it. I love a good call to action. So basically, like Meg said, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. We invite you to join any of our councils, like I said before, if you want to recommend anyone. But most importantly, we would love to hear your suggestions for discussion topics and desired trainings for future council events or just for the meetings in general. So thank you. All right, so now we're going to get into the reason you are here. So we are going to move into our presentations now, but first I'm going to do a brief biography on Dr. Alison Thomas-Cottingham. So Dr. Alison Thomas-Cottingham is the principal investigator in charge of research at Sabre 88 LLC in Newark, New Jersey, and an associate professor of psychology at Rider University in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. As a clinical psychologist with a specialty in community health psychology, Dr. Thomas-Cottingham enjoys supporting and inspiring her students in their study of the field. She teaches a variety of courses at Rider, including abnormal psychology, personality, introduction to research methods, and psychology of aging. Dr. Thomas-Cottingham's current research and clinical interests focus on the health of older adults. She partners with organizations in the public and private sectors to educate older adults about sexual health and promote improvements in community health. Dr. Thomas-Cottingham has conducted numerous workshops and delivered presentations at senior centers throughout the state of New Jersey. She has provided keynote addresses at meetings of the New Jersey Advocates for Aging Well, formerly New Jersey Foundation for Aging, and New Jersey Partners. She speaks on multiple topics, from sexual health among older adults to the importance of social relationships and the impact of social isolation on the health of older adults. Dr. Thomas-Cottingham periodically provides commentary on the topic of aging to various media. She has contributed a series of articles to Renaissance Magazine, a publication of the New Jersey Foundation on Aging, and appeared on Aging Insights, a local community television series. I believe that's how I found her. Born and raised in East Orange, New Jersey, she graduated from the Montclair Kimberly Academy, earned a BS in psychology from the University of Maryland, College Park, and an MA and PhD in clinical psychology from Bingham University, formerly known as the State University of New York at Binghamton. She completed her pre-doctoral internship at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, North Campus, in the Child and Adolescent Outpatient Service Unit. Dr. Thomas-Cottingham is the author of the book, Psychology Made Simple, and numerous articles on aging and older adults. She serves as a consulting editor for the Journal of American College Health and is a member of various professional associations, including the American Psychological Association and the Association of Black Psychologists. She is the proud mother of 2 young adults, Robert and Alison. In her spare time, she likes to volunteer for her church and sorority. She also enjoys baking, knitting, and traveling with her husband, Bob. So, welcome, Dr. Alison Thomas-Cottingham.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Can everyone hear me? I'm gonna try to use my, as I tell my kids, use my outside voice. So, thank you for having me here. I am so happy to be here with you this morning. I want to start out by thanking Rheanah Johnson for the invitation. And also, I was looking around, I didn't see her, but I also wanted to thank Juana James, who was great about giving me a tour of the space to help me prepare for today's presentation. So, let me start by just, Rheanah already mentioned my areas of research interest, but I'm just going to say that, you know, I have been interested in this topic for a really long time, but the recent report from the Surgeons General has inspired a nationwide conversation about the impact of social isolation and loneliness and what we can do to address the problem. Before I launch into the discussion, I want to start by providing you with a roadmap so you have a sense of where we're headed this morning. I am going to start out by making clear the difference between social isolation and loneliness, because we tend to use those terms as if they're synonymous, but they're not. There are differences between the two. So I'm going to start out by differentiating between social isolation and loneliness. Then we're going to talk about our 2 target populations for the morning, older adults and adolescents. Why have we chosen these 2 groups as groups of interest in discussing social isolation and loneliness? Then I'm going to move on to talk about the impact. There is so much research being done and so much is coming out about how social isolation and loneliness impact our minds, our bodies, our spirits. And so I'm going to talk about cognitive impacts, psychological impacts, social impacts, physical impacts, and just overall how social isolation affects well-being. And then finally, I want to leave you with some best practices. I want to talk about some things that we can do as a society, as a community, as individuals to combat the effects of social isolation and loneliness. But I want to start out with something interactive. And so I am going to ask you all to get your devices out, a phone, a tablet. Thank you, Rheanah. So this is Mentimeter, and it's going to allow us to make some fun word clouds. So here is my question to you, and this is inspired by a psychological technique that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of before, free association. I want you to think about the first 3 words that come to mind when you hear the following words: social isolation and loneliness. I see depression, depressed, sad, alone. Helpless. Fear. Sadness. People. So I want you to think about, we're gonna, talk about these two concepts, but lack of purpose, mental health, despair, bowling alone, emptiness, overwhelmed, COVID-19. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Now I'm doing all sorts of stuff.
Giving you a sneak peek.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, thanks, go. Okay, so there we go. Okay. Thank you. So, I want you all to think about the word cloud that you all just created, and some of those words, they're gonna pop up again and again and again. I wanna begin with a quote from a researcher named Julianne Holt-Lunstad, who has conducted lots of work in this area. She says, being connected to others socially is widely considered a fundamental human need, crucial to both well-being and survival. So again, what the research shows, and what I'm gonna say repeatedly, is that relationships and community are an essential part of our well-being. And Dr. Holt-Lundstad's quote just kind of emphasizes the importance of being in community with each other. Okay, so let's start with these definitions I talked about. We tend to use the terms social isolation and loneliness as if they are the same, but they are quite different. Let's start with social isolation. The term social isolation is objective. It is measured by questions such as, how many people do you interact with each day? Or how many people are in your social circle? It's quantitative in that if you were to gather information about social isolation using some of these scales that are commonly used, it would yield a number. Loneliness, on the other hand, is subjective. Loneliness taps into our perceptions of social connection. It's qualitative. Perceived loneliness is defined as a discrepancy between your desired social relationships and your actual social relationships. And when you're not feeling good about what you actually have as compared to what you would like to have, that's when we would say someone is experiencing loneliness. These are two scales that are commonly used to tap into social isolation and loneliness. And I just wanted to share some of the items with you because I think they help to kind of make really clear the differences between the two. So, the Lubin Social Network Scale, here are some questions from that scale. How many friends or relatives do you see or hear from at least once a month? How many relatives or friends do you feel at ease with that you can talk to about private matters? How many relatives or friends do you feel close to such that you can call on them for help. So again, that like quantitative, how many people are there in your circle? The DeLong-Geerwald loneliness scale, there are people, plenty of people I can rely on when I have problems. I miss having people around me. There are enough people that I feel close to. And the responses to those statements would, the person would expand on them and provide some additional information. So again, how do you feel about your social connections? And so one of the things that's important to point out is that people can be isolated, but not lonely. So we all know that there are times when we want alone time, right? And we're looking forward to it. It's something that's good, right? So being isolated is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's not the same thing as being lonely. Throughout the course of this talk, I'm going to use both terms, but I just want you to have a sense of the differences. So, as I mentioned, this talk was inspired by the report from the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. The title of the report is Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation, 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General's Advisory on the Healing Effects of Social Connection and the Community. So it just kind of got me thinking about, just a few moments ago, as the advisory councils were presenting, there was this, Meg, I think you said it, this question about, are we becoming more comfortable discussing mental health issues, or are mental health issues on the rise? And the same sort of question can be asked about social isolation and loneliness. Is this a new thing? Were people not socially isolated and lonely 50 years ago? Or is it just that we're more comfortable now saying, I'm lonely? We're more comfortable now saying, I'm not feeling good about my social connections. And so I looked at some data from the US Census and some other sources to get a sense of, whether or not is this a new thing? When we explore trends, we see that social connection is declining as more people are living alone, more people are spending time alone. So when we look at the 2020 census data, the share of people who live alone has tripled. 46% of adults in the United States are not married, and this includes people who are never married, people who are divorced, people who are widowed, people who are separated. Another way that many of us find connection to others is through worship. Data from the Pew Research Center and the General Social Survey data tells us that there is a rise in the religious nuns. And the religious nuns are defined as people who identify as agnostic, atheist, or having no religious affiliation. Another way that we connect with others is through volunteerism. Data from the US Census Bureau and AmeriCorps tells us that volunteerism has dropped 7% between 2019 and 2022. Now you might be able to say, yeah, but that was the pandemic, and so lots of things dropped. So that's something that I actually would question a little bit more, but again, volunteerism is a place where we go and we meet people and we make friends, and if the numbers of people who are volunteering are down, then that is also evidence that possibly we are becoming more and more solitary. There was a great article in the New York Times a few weeks ago by an author, Nicholas Kristof. And in that article, he coined this phrase that I just think is really powerful. He said in the article, wealth drives us toward solitude. And he talked about how once upon a time, we used to live and share space. And specifically, he talked talks about how growing up, many of us shared rooms with our siblings, right? So you shared a room with your brother or your sister. We would sit in the kitchen with our families and we would chat. But now, Christoph says, as we've become more prosperous, we've become more solitary. And so as we've become more prosperous, we've moved into larger spaces where every kid has their own room and everybody has their own space. So maybe one family member, will go to the man cave at the end of the day. Another family member will go to her room at the end of the day. The other family member will go jump in the pool. And so wealth drives us toward solitude. So the data suggests that we are becoming more and more solitary. So when we think about social isolation, we're going to focus on two groups. The first is adolescents. And so I just wanted to give you guys some visuals, something to look at, to think about. What do we imagine when we think about the lonely teen? What do we imagine when we think about the lonely older adult? Rheanah, I need help. There we go. I don't even know. Okay, we're good. Thank you. So, you might be asking, why these two populations? Why are we focusing on adolescents and older adults as we think about social isolation and the impacts on what we can do? Yang and Victor are two researchers who have created something which is called the U-shaped distribution. And according to Yang and Victor, rates of loneliness peak at 2 points in our lives. Young adulthood or adolescence and older adulthood. And loneliness, as you guys can see, decreases during middle adulthood. So peaks during adolescence, decreases during middle adulthood, and then peaks again during older adulthood. It's interesting because when we think about teens, historically we've been very concerned with teens and externalized risk. So we think about teens and we worry about drunk driving. From a public health perspective, we worry about drunk driving. We worry about cigarette use. We worry about unintended pregnancies. But now with teens, we're starting to see more and more internalized sorts of issues. So anxiety and depression. And again, this is linked to social isolation and loneliness. Rates of loneliness among young adults have increased every year since 1976. So surveys of young adults inquiring about how lonely they are, the rates of loneliness have been increasing for quite a while. The highest rates of social isolation are found among older adults 65 and older. And so older adults are more likely to report being socially isolated. Teens are more likely to report being lonely. So that's why I say some are isolated, others are lonely. But clearly, these two groups are very vulnerable when it comes to social isolation and loneliness. So let's dig a little deeper into adolescence and talk about adolescence. So according to the American Psychological Association, adolescence is defined as the period associated with the ages 10 to 12 through 18 to 20, roughly. Adolescence seems to be lasting longer and longer. In 2000, Jeffrey Arnett coined the term emerging adulthood, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And emerging adulthood is defined as the period that spans ages 18 to 25. And emerging adulthood has come into existence because young adults are taking longer to launch. So when we look at the age of first marriage in 1970, anybody want to guess what the age of first marriage was for a man in 1970? 24. Ooh, very good. It's 23 for a male, and for a woman, 21. Anybody want to guess the age of first marriage in 2021?
32.
29.
The age of first marriage for both males and females in 2021 was 29.2. Okay, so we go from that young man in 1970 at the age of 23 was probably getting hitched to that young man in 2021 who is waiting until he's 30.2 years old. And when we look at young women, in 1970, age of first marriage for a young woman was 21, and in 2021, age of first marriage is 28.1. So young adults are waiting longer and longer to marry. They're waiting longer and longer. As the mother of young adults who are at home right now, looking for a job, they wait longer and longer to move out of the house. And so this term, emerging adulthood, has been created. And so when I talk about adolescents, I'm going to talk about folks who are anywhere from 10 to 25. I know this seems really broad, but adolescence is lasting longer and longer and longer. And so that should be emerging adulthood. I apologize for that error. So when we think about these young people, you know, what's going on with them socially? You all know that adolescence is a period of great physical, psychological, cognitive, and social development. Socially, adolescents are shifting from the family as their main source of social support to peers. They're figuring out who they are, what they want to do, what their interests are, what they want to be. This is an important time for identity formation. They are using social media to make those connections, those social connections that are all important in helping them to form who it is they ultimately will become. Older adults. This is also a really incredibly diverse group. So when we talk about older adults, we typically begin with the age of 65. That's the age a lot of people identify as, like, that's when you are an older adult. But you guys know, because, you know, here where we live in New Jersey, there are those 55 plus communities popping up all over the place, right? So is 55 an older adult? And also, you know, when do you get your AARP membership invitation? At what age? 50, right? 48. They start sending them like in your late 40s. So, you know, how you define older adulthood depends on who you talk to. I'm gonna use 65 as the age. at which I am defining people as older adults. And older adults are such a diverse group that they have been placed into 3 subcategories because they're so different. So when we talk about older adults, we talk about the young old. Those are older adults between the ages of 65 and 74. The old, who are older adults between 75 and 84. And then the oldest old, who are 85 and older. And as you can imagine, you know, in terms of physical, social, cognitive, psychological development, there are huge differences between these groups. You know, just even physically, a 65-year-old adult is very different physically from a 90-year-old. And so you can appreciate the need for these different categories. Older adults are a group that is getting more and more attention. I'm sure you all have heard about 2030. Everybody's talking about 2030. 2030 is the year when all baby boomers will be older than 65. And so people talk about 2030 as the moment, the first time in our country's history, there will be more people over 65 than under 18. So suddenly, not suddenly, it's been coming for a while, but we will have more older adults than we do children in our society. And there are all sorts of issues and special needs that we need to consider as we prepare for these older adults who are living longer and longer and longer. When we think about older adults and what they're experiencing, just as we talked about adolescents are shifting focus from family to peers, identity is forming. When we talk about older adults and what they're experiencing, in terms of social experiences, their social circles are shrinking. And there are lots of reasons that our social circles, I can't say it too many times, our social circles shrink as we get older. And I'm gonna start with like a question. When we are middle-aged, where do we make friends and meet people? At work?
Through our children.
Through our children, okay? And so what happens when you're 65 and you retire, right? What happens, you know, when your children grow up and they go away? So the places where we meet people and make friends, like you guys said, is work, through our children. For many of us, older age means retirement. And as our children grow and move out, those people that we chatted with at soccer games and at baseball games, those relationships end. Those people we chatted with over the water cooler, at the microwave, in the office, those relationships end. Other friends that we may have made throughout the years move away, they move to other states, friends pass away, and so as our roles shift, as the demographics change, our social circles shrink. In addition, older adults are more likely to experience health challenges that might affect them socially. So, you know, I'm not gonna go to happy hour with my friends because the restaurant is crowded and it's loud and I can't hear what anyone's saying. So it's not enjoyable. I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna go to book club at the library with friends. I know I usually do it once a month, but getting out of this apartment is a big chore. It's exhausting, and so, you know, it takes a lot of time for me to, you know, get myself together, and I just don't have the energy, and then walking down the stairs is exhausting. I'm just gonna stay home. And so older adults may experience health challenges that also contribute to that shrinking social circle. Finally, social pruning is a really interesting concept, and it's something that older adults tend to do. And I'm gonna step away from the social isolation, loneliness conversation for a second and talk about gardening. Does anybody here garden? Okay. Why do you prune? What does pruning do?
Makes it better.
It makes it better. It shapes it.
Healthier.
It makes it healthier. Older adults do something that's called social pruning. I always have to call Edna. She never calls me. I'm always the one to initiate. I'm tired of that, you know? And when we have lunch, all she talks about is her grandson. She never asks me about my grandson. Edna's not a good friend. I'm not gonna continue with that relationship. Older adults are more likely to get rid of relationships in which they feel there is no reciprocity, while working really hard to cultivate the relationships they value. But, and that sounds like a good idea. Like, we talk all the time about younger people and how they have relationships that aren't healthy or beneficial. So older people, they got it, right? Get rid of those unhealthy relationships so that the ones that you have can grow and bloom. But they're doing it at a time when they already have fewer and fewer and fewer people to begin with. So for these reasons and so many more, older adults are also having some challenges socially, which can contribute to feelings of isolation and loneliness. So the outcomes. There are many, 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 and they fall into lots of different categories. I'm going to talk briefly about cognitive outcomes, social outcomes. There's a lot of research about how being lonely and socially isolated affects our bodies. And then psychological outcomes, educational and occupational outcomes. But I'm going to start with a graphic that I bet a lot of you have seen. I keep seeing this graphic. I've seen it on websites. I've heard people say this thing on the radio. And basically what it is, and the Surgeon General talks about it in his report, loneliness and social isolation are as dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that's really powerful, and it communicates the serious nature of this epidemic, as he calls it. So the bottom line is that social isolation and loneliness place individuals at greater risk for all sorts of negative outcomes and for premature mortality. So let's start with cognitive outcomes. And when we talk about cognitive outcomes, we're talking about things like memory and attention and processing speed, the ability to focus. Cognitive abilities are developing in adolescence. They're also a concern for older adults, right? How many times do we talk about having like a senior moment where you forget something? What the research has shown is that social isolation and loneliness have a negative impact, of course, on cognitive health. Specifically, wider social networks and more frequent social engagement with friends is linked to better cognitive health and protects against dementia. So I know a lot of you out there are doing all of those games that we're supposed to do to keep our minds sharp. My 85-year-old mother always has like a find a word book in her purse, right? And we've heard about the importance of doing those things, and those things are good, but they're even better when they're done with other people. So engaging in some sort of activity with friends is good for our cognitive health. When you don't do it, people who don't are more likely to have cognitive impairments. Social outcomes. This one is kind of like it's a vicious cycle. Okay, so you all know basically social engagement requires social skills. And social skills are things that we have to develop. It's a skill like any other skill that we have. And adolescents are learning that skill. adolescents are learning how to initiate conversation, how to shake hands and look a person in the eye, how to make friends, how to maintain friendships. And when you don't have the opportunities to exercise that skill, you get rusty. And so we adapt to being alone, which makes socialization more difficult. And I know, like, during the pandemic, many of us were suddenly placed in a position where we were expected to adapt to being alone. But now, some people are having difficulty socializing because they haven't had the opportunity for a while. And it makes it more difficult. And again, keep thinking about that, that shrinking social network, older adults, adolescents, the shrinking social network is not a good thing. Tons of work out there to look at the impact of social isolation and loneliness on our physical health. I'm going to share just 3 studies with you. Let's start with cardiovascular disease. So we're talking about heart disease and stroke. A study was conducted that discovered that those who are less socially connected may be less likely to make it to the hospital in the case of a cardiac event. So those who are less socially connected are less likely to make it to the hospital in the case of a cardiac event. And for those of you who are familiar with cardiovascular disease, like, time is of the essence. Like, the faster you can get someone, to a place where they can get the appropriate medical care, the better. Why is this the case that people who don't have social connections don't make it? Anybody have any thoughts?
They don't have as many people to reach out to.
They don't have as many people to reach out to. So they don't have someone to call to say, hey, I'm not feeling so good. Can you come and take me to the hospital? When we're sitting alone and when you feel a little not so good, you're in your house by yourself, you may be more likely to minimize or just say, oh, I'll just wait, it'll get better. So not having social connections has been linked to negative outcomes with regard to cardiovascular disease. Diabetes, similar sort of study. Those with large social support networks, and a large social support network is defined as at least 6 social ties, and this includes parents, spouse, friend, co-workers, family members, people who are like in a club with you, or people who maybe you're in some sort of organization with. People who have large social networks were better at managing their diabetes. Why? Well, again, same thing. If you have social supports, you might have someone who says to you, I don't think you should eat that. That's not good. When's the last time you had a doctor's appointment? Or even just call you up and say, hey, how are you feeling? How are you doing, right? And so having those people in your life who check in with you and possibly hold you accountable for the decisions you make about your health is really important. And then finally, colds. There was a study that found that people, again, who have a large social support network had a 4-fold lower risk of developing a cold as compared to those without social supports or with a small number of social ties. Other outcomes. We also know that social isolation and loneliness are very strongly linked to mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, and lethal suicide behavior are strongly linked to social isolation and loneliness. Actually, social isolation is a reliable predictor of suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, and lethal suicide behavior. In addition, there are educational outcomes such as dropouts, school dropouts, so people who are socially isolated are more likely to drop out of school, and also people who are socially isolated and lonely are more likely to report low job satisfaction. So overall, there are many negative outcomes associated with social isolation and loneliness. And I wanna, as we wind down, I want us to think about okay, so what do we do? What can we do? Social isolation and loneliness impact individuals and communities. The interventions out there are many, and they, can focus on solutions that are what I'm calling both broad and narrow, and so in scope. And so I'm going to start out by talking about like globally what folks are doing, and we're going to narrow it down to talk about things that we as individuals can do. There are lots of global best practices out there. I'm going to focus on 4 countries: the United Kingdom, Sweden, Australia, and the United States, and just talk about things that are going on in those places to combat this epidemic. So let's start with the UK. In the United Kingdom, first, there's a job, there's a position. It is called the Minister for Loneliness. And this person's job is to create policy, to create programming, to monitor the level of loneliness. There are all sorts of activities that include community building activities. There's Loneliness Awareness Week. There is the Chatty Bench, which I'll talk about in a minute. There are community litter pickups, family style meals, nature walks, songwriting activities. So lots of activities where people are encouraged to get together and to interact with each other. In Sweden, there's also a job. It is called the Minister for Social Affairs. And so again, this idea of there being a position communicates the serious concern about this issue because it merits governmental action. In Australia, there is a post similar to the Minister of Loneliness, and there's the Chatty Bench. We'll talk about the Chatty Bench. The Chatty Bench is a designated place to sit in a public space, like let's say it's a park, for example. If someone is sitting on the Chatty Bench, it communicates that they would like to talk or chat with others. So it's a place where people can go to meet others who are interested in social engagement. And some of you are making faces, because if you saw some random woman sitting on a bench, and the bench says, this is the Chatty Bench, I don't know if you feel comfortable going and sitting and talking to her, but you know that woman is open for that, right? So the Chatty Bench. Bench. It's a bench, and if you sit on this bench, it means somebody come, I want to talk, I want to engage. And then in the U.S., we have tons of things going on in the U.S. And also let me say, there also are programs in France, Japan, Denmark. So globally, people are aware of this issue and they're working to deal with it. In the U.S., we have lots of initiatives. One that I want to share with you, which I think is interesting because it actually gets at our populations, is intergenerational housing or co-housing, where you have people of different ages living together in a home where there's a combination of private space and shared space. And so imagine a house where there is a kitchen or a living room or a dining room where people hang out. And if you want to engage, you can go and sit in this space and talk. And we know the value of intergenerational interaction, right? We know that there is so much that older adults can learn from younger people. I love those commercials where we have the grandma and the granddaughter's teaching the grandma a TikTok dance, right? So intergenerational interaction is really powerful. Similarly, of course, young adults or adolescents can learn from older adults as well. And so this idea of co-housing or intergenerational interaction is something that is an initiative to kind of encourage social engagement. And so we're getting more narrow. So thinking about community best practices, there are so many things going on here in Somerset County, and I just listed some of the different departments and agencies. So there's the Department of Human Services, the Parks Commission, partner agencies, and within these places there are programs like the Senior Wellness Centers, which encourage older adults to get together and to be in community with one another. For young adults, for adolescents, there is the Youth Council, and there's 4-H. Again, opportunities for people to come together and to engage with each other. I'm going to get a little bit more narrow and talk about individual best practices. So what are things that we can do as individuals? And there are so many things, and I just pulled a few things from the Surgeon General's report. Again, I would really encourage you to read it. It's very good, and he goes into a lot of suggestions about things that can be done at a community level, and makes recommendations that I think you all would really appreciate. These are recommendations for individual best practices. So one of the first things is teaching children in your life that it's okay to be alone, right? I talked about how one can be isolated but not lonely. Helping children to understand that on occasion it's okay to be alone, and on occasion it's okay to be lonely. We all are lonely at some point, right? We all experience loneliness. But as long as it's not chronic loneliness, it's something that we can work through. Answer that phone call from a friend. I know we all have devices that tell us who's calling, right? And I know we're all busy, and I know. I do it all the time. But answer that phone call from a friend. It can make a huge difference. Make time to share a meal. A survey was conducted. Adolescents were asked about their relationships with their family and what they wish they had more of with their family, and they said they wish they had more time with their family, right? And so sitting down and having a meal with, the adolescent in your life or the older adult in your life, doesn't take a lot of time, makes a huge difference. Listen without the distraction of your phone. I just learned this new word, fubbing. Do you guys know what fubbing is? Do you know what fubbing is? Have you ever seen a couple at a restaurant having dinner and one person is like on the phone and the other person is kind of like staring out into space? That's fubbing. Fubbing is when I'm interacting, I'm talking to David, but David's on his phone. And so he's looking down and I'm saying, yeah, David, did you see the game last night? That's fubbing. Don't fub. Don't be a fubber. Listen without the distraction of your phone. Make time for community service. Community service is wonderful in that it provides an opportunity for you to meet people and make friends and engage. And then express yourself authentically, bless you. When we think about adolescence and identity formation and they're trying to figure out who they are, we often hear about the struggles they have with regard to presenting themselves authentically and feeling this pressure. And you know, this is something that we all experienced as adolescents. Like, you're trying to figure out who you are, who you want to hang with, what you want to wear, and there's pressure to be perfect, right? And so just kind of like relaxing and just presenting yourself to your people as you are authentically. And I'm talking about all of these, like, these are things we can do to help other people, but these are also things that will help us, right? And so, you know, if we're feeling a little out of connection, these are things that we can think about as well. Okay, Mentimeters, the final Mentimeter. So I'm gonna ask you all, again, 3, and this time I'm gonna ask you for 3 phrases. And I'd like you to think about, thank you so much, Rheanah. Share 3 things that you can do to combat social isolation and loneliness. Volunteer, join a club, like a phone. Call your mom. How lovely. Yes.
Can we get the code again?
Yes. The code is 8739 6779. So again, that's 8739 6779. Golfing with my sister. Volunteer, join a club. Sports, yes. Call friends. Cell phone fasting. Therapy. Get a dog. Get a dog. Tell a friend how you feel. Support community events. I love this because there are so many ways that you can, right? And this word cloud reflects that. So certainly volunteer and join a club are at the heart of it, but there's so many others. And I think that that kind of communicates it. Like, there are things that we can do, you know, so, something to go back to. Thank you. So I'm gonna wrap up, and you know, this is a problem, this is a concern. The Surgeon General is calling it an epidemic, but it is a concern that has solutions. And there's solutions that we can all do, which makes it feel not so hopeless. I remember the word hopeless was a word that we saw in the first word cloud. I'm going to share with you, as I close, a quote from, this is Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General. And so he says, if we fail to do so, and he means address this epidemic, we will pay an ever-increasing price in the form of our individual and collective health and well-being. And we will continue to splinter and divide until we can no longer stand as a community or a country. Instead of coming together to take on the great challenges before us, we will further retreat to our corners, angry, sick, and alone. And so, you know, again, I hope, you know, I've left you with some ideas or some thoughts about tools that you can use to combat social isolation and loneliness. Thank you again for your attention. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, I know we're getting close on time, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address them. Oh, okay. email question? Yes.
I noticed there was, missing is the social media and the impact of the negative stuff, the incorrect stuff, and the frustration of trying to go through that. And I can understand where these two groups, adolescents and seniors, would